now turn to the origins of this education workshop. So last November, we had a strategy meeting at the European Accounting Association meeting in Brussels about the future of our association. And we looked at our membership survey that we conducted in September last year. And we asked the members all kinds of questions, but one of the questions was, what kind of future services would you like to have and being provided by the EAA? And actually very high on the list was education-related materials and education-related support from the association, because as you know, 43 years ago, the EAA started as a pure research association. Yep. So that made us decide to build a new education pillar in the association. And in order to do this, we formed a task force of 4 people who know the association quite well. So that's Salvador Carmona from IE, Nick McGeegan from Monash University, Seppo Ikeheimo from Aalto University, and myself from Tilburg University. And the 4 of us had great ideas and plans for the annual meeting at the end of May in Bucharest. All kinds of education events would take place, but of course you know that because of the COVID situation, the annual meeting was cancelled. But that's made us think more about hosting like a virtual event and events in the future as well. So this is actually the origin of this workshop. So this is quite an important event in our 43 years of EAA history. And we got, to our surprise, a lot of registrations. And so as you can see, we already have more than 250 participants now. And that's very nice. And it's from all over the world. So this is open to all members and non-members alike. So that's good. Now, the large number of participants in the 2 workshops is not surprising because of the COVID situation, we definitely got into a very uncertain teaching environment. And we all struggle with all kinds of questions. Myself, I had to start teaching in March when there was this lockdown, and immediately, I'm not an online teacher. I was confronted with many things that we will discuss during this workshop. So I learned a lot, but I did it the hard way. And now this workshop with Marco and Nieves will help you the soft way, or the easy way, hopefully. So it's great that we have 2 speakers with a lot of experience who want to share their experience. But before I introduce the speakers, let me first say a few words about a very short survey we want to conduct. So Baha Diyarov, our executive secretary of the EAA and also the host of this Zoom session, the person who sent you the email and the reminder, will now post in the chat a link, as you can see on your screen now, a link to SurveyMonkey. So please, if I can ask you to follow the link, in the chat. Click on the link, and then it will take you to a web page of SurveyMonkey, and then we ask some very basic questions, and this will definitely help us to organize future education events, because your input will be considered as very important and very helpful. So you can start doing this now if you want. It shouldn't take you longer than 80 seconds. So that's the idea. But the survey will be open until the end of this workshop. So you have until 3 o'clock to finish the survey. Yep. So take your time. It shouldn't distract you too much, of course, from our presentation. Okay, so that said, I would like to now introduce the 2 speakers for the workshop today. Nieves Carrera is a professor of accounting at IE Business School in Madrid, and she has been teaching financial accounting and financial reporting and analysis online for more than 10 years. So she's very experienced, both in global MBA programs, but also in executive MBA online programs, like more executive type of programs. And then her colleague, Marco Trombetta, is also a professor of accounting at IE University. He has been teaching accounting courses online since 2002. Because there in 2002 he started a pilot project at the undergraduate level at another Spanish university, Carlos III, and that was definitely pioneering online education experience. Yep. But Marco is also now teaching more at a gradual level of IE Business School. So thank you very much, Marco and Nieves, to be here today and to share your experiences with our colleagues all over the world. So Marco, I will now give you the floor for your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Philip, and thank you all for being here, okay, and participate to this first online education session. So a couple of things before I start, okay, as Philip has said, this is a little bit of a teaser, okay, so we will give an overview of few themes, okay, and then hopefully after the summer there will be more in-depth analysis of each one of these blocks in dedicated sessions organized by the EAA. And also, even if we have experience at both level, okay, most of what we say is actually based on our graduate teaching experience, a little bit less on undergraduate teaching experience. This may appear a little bit as we speak, okay? So let's start. The session is divided into 4 blocks. I will start with the first one, where I will discuss about some general elements of moving from presential teaching to online teaching. Then Nieves will take over and will talk about how to plan for an accounting course in an uncertain environment. And then she will continue and present some example of synchronous teaching activities. And then I will finish with the last block, where I will present some example of asynchronous activities. And in between each one of these blocks, you will have the chance to ask us, well, through the chat and through the moderators, you will have the chance to ask some question, and we will take this question. So let's get started. So what do you always have in any physical classroom? This is the question that I want to start from. And here you have a picture of a very, very simple classroom, okay? But even in this very, very simple, inexpensive classroom, you have certain elements that you always have in a physical classroom. You have proximity with the students, so the teacher is very close to the students, okay? You have, in this case, a blackboard here, okay? And then you have room to move around. The teacher can actually walk around between the class, okay? And you have eye contact. The teacher can actually look in the eyes to the students, okay? And the teacher also has his or her full body, okay? So you can walk around, as I said, use your hands, use your legs, and so on, okay? This is what you have in any physical classroom. What do you have in a 21st century physical classroom, given the technology advance? What can you have there? You can have a computer connected to a beamer, okay? You can have internet connection while you're teaching. You have mobile phones, you and your students, you may not use it, you may or may not use it, it depends, okay? And then you have a digital whiteboard. In this case, this is a digital whiteboard, which is close to a physical whiteboard here, okay? And then you have tablets or laptops for your students. So each of the students here have their own laptops or tablet in front of them, okay? So what happens when you move, you transition from physical presential teaching to online teaching? What do you lose? You lose what we saw at the beginning. You lose the proximity with the students. You lose the physical black or whiteboard. You lose the room to move around. You lose eye contact, and you lose your full body. You don't have your full body. So this is gone. but you keep all the rest, okay? You still might have a computer connected to Beamer, you still have an internet connection, you still have mobile phones, you and your students probably, you still have a digital, you may have at least a digital whiteboard, and you have tablets or laptops for your students, okay? And so this is how a online teaching class may look like, okay? How difficult is the transition? I have organized the answer to this question along 2 dimensions, okay? How much body language you are used to use in your regular presential teaching, and how much technology you are used to use in your presential teaching, okay? And so if you use already a lot of technology in your presential teaching and you don't use a lot of body language in your presential teaching, then the transition is going to be fairly easy, okay? So because what you lose is what you don't use too much, and what you still have is what is already the protagonist of your teaching, okay? On the other hand of the spectrum, if you don't use a lot of technology in your presential teaching, but you use a lot of body language in your presential teaching, then it's going to be very tough, okay? Because what you have now is what you're not used to use that much, and what you lose is exactly your main communication tool that you use through your teaching. And then you have the 2 intermediate situation, okay? So if you use very little of both, it's going to be tough because you still have to use technology that you are not familiar with necessarily. If you use a lot of technology and a lot of body language, it's tough, but it's probably not so difficult because, again, you are used to technology. And so the transition from using your body language through tech-mediated language is not going to be too challenging, okay? So what is the key factor of this transition? Hardware, okay? The hardware that you have at your disposal, it affects dramatically what you can or you cannot do in your class, the processing power of your computer, and so on. It changes a lot. You need to substitute body language with tech-mediated language, okay? That's what you have to do. But it's not just a barrier, it can be an opportunity. It forces you to walk into the 21st century technology. That is the only way of doing online teaching. You need modern technology, and so you will discover a lot of interesting things that technology can allow you to do, okay? You can control what you have, but not what they have. So my tip is assume the minimum for students, okay? Don't assume that they have a huge, incredibly up-to-date technology, but try to expand your possibility as much as you can, okay? It's a good time to make a little bit of an investment in some hardware that can make your online teaching much better, or to negotiate with your institution if they can provide a little bit more hardware if you don't have it already, okay? This is particularly important for exercise-based, number-based teaching, okay? When you have to deal with exercise and number, technology is even more important, okay? And what you can or you cannot do is very important. And so my tip here is that some sort of touch screen technology makes a huge difference, okay? You have already noticed that I can actually write while I teach, okay? And this is because I'm using, for example, in my case, a Surface, but you can use an iPad. But some touch screen technology can make quite a bit difference and can make your transition easier. What about substituting body language with tech-mediated language? You have to strike a difficult balance between becoming a YouTuber or influencer, okay, social media, web-based expert, and keep your professorial role. So you don't have to get carried away, okay? You're still a professor, you're still teaching, okay, and you have to keep your role, but don't be afraid of learning some tricks while you transition. And so by looking at some video on YouTube or other channels and so on, you can learn some tricks from experts on this type of communication. But remember, students still want to get in touch with you, okay? Students, especially those that are forced to go online, still wants to have some interaction with you as much as possible. They didn't want to do this, they are forced to do this. And so it cannot be a transition to a MOOC, a massive online open course, okay? So self-study is not enough, interaction is needed. But when mediated by technology, it becomes a little bit riskier because technology can freeze, you can have glitches, it can break down, and we will talk a little bit more about that later on in the sessions, okay? And make sure that you know they know you are there. Okay, you don't have to be available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days per year. Okay, but you have to remember that they do not see you around campus. Okay, and so the only way to make sure that they know that you are there is to keep some constant communication with them somehow. Okay, so to sum up, can it work? Yes, it has been around for quite a while. Okay, and it works. Okay, what is the most critical factor? Probably technology and hardware. Okay, online teaching is impossible without a minimum equipment in terms of hardware. Can you do it? Yes, anyone who is passionate about teaching can transition to online teaching. Don't be mistaken, it's still about you and them, okay? And technology is only a mean to an end, okay? So trust you and trust them, it will work. I'm open to questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Marco. So before we actually get into the questions, let me remind you that we have this online survey in SurveyMonkey, and you can find the link in the chat. So please, for those of you who basically joined a little bit later, please fill out the survey. It will definitely help us for organizing future workshops. Okay, thank you. Now let me go to Christina. Christina, do you have some questions for Marco?
Yes, Philip, there was just one question coming up right now. And the question is, what kind of hardware do you refer to? So what is the minimum equipment that you talk about when you said that this is necessary for teaching?
The minimum equipment that you need to do online teaching is internet connection of some sort of reliability, okay, and some sort of either at least a mobile phone, a sort of a smartphone, preferably at least a tablet or a computer. Okay, so but as a teacher, I would say a computer, you need to do it properly. As a teacher, you need a computer with some processing power. Okay, and to make it easily, to make it not too difficult, and to be a little bit more free and so on, some touch screen technology. So either a computer which is a touch screen computer, or a tablet that you can connect to your computer, or a digital whiteboard.
Okay, thank you. Another question is, how do you engage students in interaction in an online session?
We will talk more about that later on with some examples as well. Okay, there are a lot of ways of doing it. You still have the usual ways, okay, questions and activities, okay, but you have to adapt them to technology. So you can use polls, you can use videos, you can show new clips from the web, and so on. Okay, so we will talk about some of these instruments, tools later on in the session.
Okay, thank you. Paul, do you want to take over?
No, most probably no more questions.
No, I don't see any other questions at the moment. Just maybe one about the whiteboard you're using. Do you have any sort of specifications with respect to which ones seem to work best?
I mean, I don't want to act as a marketing agent for any. There are few available. Okay, so at the moment I'm using a Surface, a Microsoft Surface, which I find very comfortable and very good because it combines the feature of a laptop with the feature of a digital whiteboard. But you can do it with a laptop and with an iPad, and connecting the iPad to the laptop, or you can. There are specific digital whiteboard that you can buy, and you don't really need to invest a lot of money to actually get something that helps you in doing what I'm doing. Okay, writing T accounts or something like that. So at the moment, I'm using a Surface, for example. Okay, so but any touch screen computer would do. Yeah.
All right. And a second question is about, does the size of the group have an impact on how you're going to sort of address the issues?
I will suspend the answer because this is one of the topic of Nieves' next section. So she will say something about that. But yes, it does. Yes. Yes.
All right. Great. Okay.
Okay, so I would propose to actually now go to Nieves for the second part.
Hello, everyone. Let me make sure that I show you my slides. Could you please confirm that you can see my slide? I am right here. Oops,
Yes.
sorry. Let me, 1 second. Here. So in this second part, what I would like to talk about is how to plan or redesign an accounting course given the uncertainty we have, okay? Well, definitely this is not business as usual. So trying to keep your teaching approach the same the same way as in face-to-face classes may not work. And why? For many different reasons. First, looking at a screen is much harder than being in a classroom, so concentration is more difficult. And this is true for students and also for us, okay, for the instructors. Then for students, this is much easier to disconnect. Someone was writing now in the chat, how do you make sure that your students are engaged? Well, this is our challenge here, okay, the main challenge. So we really need to make effort in catching the students' attention and keep them engaged in spite of the distance, okay? And then, as Marco was mentioning before, technology may impose limits on both sides for you as an instructor, and then it's important to take into account the needs or what the students have, okay? Final point, improvisation does not work equally well. That is, when we walk into a classroom, we may just open the session with a joke or related to something that we have seen in the corridor or related to the newspaper that we bring with us. This kind of approach may not work the same way in a virtual classroom. So you need to plan in advance. So investing time in planning the sessions and planning the course is extremely important. So, and what will be here the first question you need to ask yourself, or questions? Well, you need to think about your students and ask simple questions like, how many students do I have? Where are they? I mean, some of these questions, the answer is taken for granted in a in a face-to-face session. Where they are in the classroom, but not anymore. Here, we need to be aware of whether they're going to be in different time zones, whether they're going to be in an area where the internet connection may not be very good, or it may have imposed some limits in the use of video conferences, for example. However, this may be good for other kind of online teaching, like asynchronous sessions. So you need to keep in mind that the information about your students, how many, where are they, etc., is key. And second, you need to understand what are the resources and constraints you have. We may not all have the access to the same resources. And importantly here, you need to understand what your institution wants. I mean, the requirements of your institution in terms of type of sessions, the technology that is available, and then you yourself have to ask what kind of materials I have in my face-to-face classes that I can use here, and what other materials I can add. Regarding the type of sessions, there are many different options, but I can think of like 3 processes here. In our institution, for example, they are trying to combine face-to-face students with some online students. And actually, this is what we did at the right before the lockdown here in Madrid. Okay, so some students were in the class, but then others were connected from home because they didn't want to come to class for risk factors, etc. This will be like a mix of presential and online education. The institution may decide to go just for virtual education. In that case, the decision is synchronous session or asynchronous session. So in the first case, video conferences, that's the main activity I can think of, or to organize the session through discussion boards. What about the technology? Again, this is very much given by the what is available at your institution. most universities, they use learning management systems. I'm thinking about Blackboard, Canvas, Moodle, Brightspace, and so that we may use already for face-to-face classes. Now, if we're moving online, this is like the room we use, okay, the virtual room where we will interact with our students. So getting to learn all the utilities these tools, the systems bring is of key importance, okay? So not just a way of uploading your materials, these learning management systems offer much more than that. And then, of course, you also need to pay attention to the guidance provided by your institution or university regarding video conferences. They may recommend or impose the use of one particular software, or the university may give rhythm to the lectures, what they want to use. They offer similar, I mean, they are very similar, okay, like Zoom, Adobe Connect, Microsoft Teams, etc. What you really need to make sure is that you're familiar with the tool and you know how you can use it and take the best of the advantages that they offer you. Then in an online setting, other tools like messaging or collaboration tools can be very handy. Okay, usually the learning management systems like Blackboard, they have some tools that you may not have used before, but now it's time to use them, okay? Or you may arrange groups through WhatsApp or other instant messaging applications. Then you may not have recorded videos before, but now they again will be very helpful. So there are software like Screencast, Omatic, or Cam Studio that they can, they're very easy to use, and you can record short videos to support your teaching. And finally, you can always use other game-based learning platforms like Kahoot. I mean, just to mention one that is very good for polls, for example, or if you're running exams online, try to use some proctoring software, like, for example, the SMOWL. Finally, what about the materials? Well, think about it. You already use a variety of different, you may use different type of materials in your face-to-face classes, from textbook to the slides, counting problems, counting cases. Well, now the textbook it's even more important, I would say. Why? Because it's a resource that connects you and your students. And the resources that some of these the publishing houses provide online now can be more relevant, okay? If before you used to mention them like, look, check the website of the publisher, you may have some quizzes there. Now you can make the use of them, okay? The slides, given that they're going to be the door through which we will connect with the students, they need to be animated, they need to be more engaging in order to keep students interested in what we are saying. And then if you have access to multimedia counting cases, that's great, okay? Because the interaction, I mean, the students actively involved in the solution of the case, and so makes them more attractive. You can also use videos taken from the web, or original videos that you record, or even crossword puzzles. Of course, they are not going to be the core of your teaching, but then if you're running an asynchronous session and you want students to kind of test what they have learned, and so instead of running a quiz, you could think about a different way of doing it, like, okay, just for fun, do a crossword puzzle just to test their knowledge and keep them engaged in the subject, okay? Or invite them to check some accounting blocks. Overall, so take into account what kind of students, how many students, where they are, take into account the resources and constraints, then you are ready to define the teaching strategies that may work for the learning objectives that you have in each class, in each session, and for the course, okay? So thinking about teaching strategies or methodologies, we may already use different approaches in our face-to-face classrooms, like modified lectures, where we want the students to ask questions if they have doubts or solve exercises. We may have other sessions that are more about explaining concepts, or there's about problems or case-based sessions, exams, quizzes, reviews. Well, time to think about what may work best in a synchronous session, in a live session, what is the best for an asynchronous session, and then what about the materials that I can use. For example, if I'm teaching a session on accounting for accounts receivable, I may just approach it as a modified lecture where I explain the main journal entries and the process of recording these transactions. But then every 10 minutes, I include some interactive material, like a poll, say, what would you do in this case, or solving an exercise. This works very nicely with a VC, a video conference. But now, if I have a session on accounting and ethics, then I may go for a case, okay? So I may use a case study. I ask the students certain questions, and then I would like them to share their experiences as well. In this case, an asynchronous learning may work nicely, okay, and smooth, because the students have time to reflect. And so we will see more other examples later on. One specific example of transition that we had to do this last May is a course called Financial Accounting and Analysis in the Master of Finance. Marco was the professor. The original course, 20 face-to-face sessions, and due to the restrictions of the COVID-19, we have to move it online. The adapted course, 20 video conferences. The advantage here is it was a very small group of students, and all but one could follow the live sessions. But then this also means that recording was required, okay, because the student in Canada, he was following the class offline. The learning objectives of the course did not change, and Marco used the same teaching strategies, meaning modified lectures with exercises, case-based sessions, review session, exam session. So then what were the main changes here? First, the evaluation criteria. Participation did not count, okay? It was one of the components of the evaluation, it didn't count. There was still some group project that it was evaluated, and then a final exam that instead of being in the classroom, it was done online. We used the technology available in Blackboard for quizzes and so, and then as a proctoring system, we had Zoom where we could see the students. This was thanks to the fact that it was a small group of students. Mark also had to do an effort in adapting the slides to online teaching. They were more visual, more dynamic, and then after, several slides, introduced some sort of interactive material, short clips, short videos, very well connected to the topic. And then the whiteboard made a difference. He explained it before. So the use of technology where you can somehow create what you were, the class, okay, as they will feel in the classroom makes a difference. So he started without using the whiteboard, then he started using it, and the students appreciated the difference. Planning your classes, planning the course is important, but all in all, you also need to plan your communication with the students. Now you don't see them in the corridors, in campus, in the classroom. You need to communicate frequently with them and make them feel supported. This also means that you need to be very clear about how and when you're gonna communicate with them. Short messages, explaining the purposes of the course, the purpose of each class, the tasks, the deadlines. Something that is very helpful, for example, is using a dashboard like the one that I have here. This is for financial accounting. The students know that for session 1, they have to read one article, okay? Then in session 3, they know that there will be a quiz. In green color, they see quizzes, okay? So they know they're gonna be tested on the material in sessions 1 and 2. And then they also know what individual work they have to do. And then in session 3, group B knows that they will have to do a presentation in class, okay? And so they know it, and everything is simplified in this dashboard. Summing up, the challenge for us here is to keep our students and ourselves as well engaged and motivated. I mean, with the distance of a virtual room, this may not be easy, okay? This means also invest time up front in planning your course and planning every session. So think carefully about the teaching strategies that may work better given the circumstances. And then you also need to determine what kind of materials may work better for synchronous and asynchronous sessions. And then it's important that you plan your communication with the students, okay? I think this is a good time for questions. And then I will very much appreciate if you can all close your mics, as I could hear some background noise. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So one question is, how do you monitor students' diligence in an online course and also in online assessments and examinations?
There are many different options, and here you need to take into account what you are doing. For example, if you are doing asynchronous sessions like forums or discussion boards, given weight to participation is good idea. It's a good idea. Why? Because you have all recorded material. Marco will talk about it later on. In video conferences, what you can do is a continuous evaluation using quizzes. I mean, platforms like Blackboard, you can run like short quizzes that students can take in class or off class, okay, asynchronously. And then you can, I mean, there are tricks like changing the order of the questions, order of the answers, a very good time management that prevent the students from, sharing, I mean, the information, okay, and cheating and so. So you really need to be very aware of your students. How many students do you have? Participation in a session like we have today will not make sense. How do I control? Unless I have someone helping me, like you. So in that case, we could see the interaction through the chat. Otherwise, it's impossible. So the evaluation, and we could easily talk for 1 hour and 30 minutes on just that subject. And hopefully there will be a session on that in September.
Okay, thank you. You also already mentioned the time of a session. So what do you think, what is the optimal length of an online session?
I would say that if it's a video conference, more than 80 minutes, it will not work. And I mean, 1 hour and 20 minutes. I'm talking about 80 minutes because this is the usual length of the duration of a video conference in my case, in our institution. But in any case, you need to make sure you have cuts in between, okay, so that you introduce interactive materials. For more than 1 hour and 20 minutes, we cannot keep our concentration and the students cannot follow us, okay? They will not be engaged. Something that a colleague of mine shared with me the other day is like using first the video conference and the second session right after the video conference, asynchronous session, where students then had to do some tasks and then the interaction happens through 10 hours. Asynchronously. So a combination of both may work for double sessions, okay? But yeah, it's hope it helps.
Thank you, it does.
Thank you.
I'll jump in with one about if you used to have breakout groups, students working in small groups, do you have a tool to try to manage something like that?
I know Zoom has this tool, and this is the first time I'm doing a presentation in tool, so I have a lot of teaching, or video conferences online, but using other software. But with Zoom, you can do it, okay? So you can break out the class in small groups, and they can work together. You as a host can have discussions with the small groups, and then bring them back all together. So this works very nicely, for example, for mini cases. You want to have the students interacting within groups, and in Zoom, this can easily be done, okay? Yeah.
All right, and then one question that's popped up a lot is the issue of how do you ensure that there's no cheating during exams?
Yeah, that was one of my concerns. I mean, look, I was asked to move online 4 sessions before my final exam with MBA students, okay? Of course, the exam and all the teaching in the period we had in mind a classroom exam. So I have to rethink about it, rethink the whole scenario. I tried to keep the exam as the original format, but I have to rewrite questions and so to make them work in an online setting. So I have 140 students. There was first a quiz, okay, with quizzes, and cheating is not so easy. And then I used for that a software called proctoring software. What it does is to record all the activity of students during the exam time. Okay, so you have that feedback. I didn't want to use it for long periods of time. I mean, for 1 hour and 30 minutes with 140 students, this is too risky. So I just use it for a short period of time, 20 minutes quiz. The remaining of the exam was offline. but it was very demanding in terms of time management. So I don't care if you have your books or you have people next to you, you don't have time. You really need to understand the questions. And then the questions were very much related to what we did in class. So you really need to know your subject, and I'm asking you questions about the group project that you did, discussions we had in this class, and so kind of customized the questions. What may work in an exam in a classroom may not work online. So we need to put effort there.
Exactly.
More questions? Know if we have time
Yeah,
for
one question came up. So if students later watch the video, is there any advice from your side on how to like keep them concentrated? Because it could be that students get tired for watching an hour-long video or something else. What do you do to like keep them motivated watching the video afterwards, especially when it comes to asynchronous teaching?
My first advice is have short videos. 60 minutes video in accounting is going to be tough. So you better have like short videos explaining one specific concept, because it helps to keep the concentration of students. It's very difficult to keep that. Of course, if it's a student following a recorded session, well, unfortunately, he or she could not follow the live class and there is no option. But then for pre-recorded videos, I wouldn't recommend to record a lecture. No, you better do like knowledge pills or short videos. So where first you explain, I mean, back to my example of the accounting for receivables, why they are important, then another short video about the key journal entries at the time of the sales. Then you may have another video for how to deal with bad debt expenses. And in between include some interactive or other kind of activities, like let's solve these exercises related to what we explained and so on. We will see some examples now.
Thank you. And another question, do you have like a list or some links of like multimedia cases or quizzes or teaching materials where you think they are very good and you could recommend? Could you provide the audience something like that?
Well, for example, in terms of multimedia cases, we know in our school, Marco and I, we created long ago a couple of multimedia cases on depreciation or accounting for bonds. So and then schools like Harvard, for example, they have some multimedia material, but this may not be feasible in terms of, I mean, the cost, okay, for the institution. So this depends. And then there are some free resources online. Something that I use from time to time is Accounting Coach. That I very much appreciate the crosswords puzzles that they have there, because sometimes at the time of closing an asynchronous session, for example, on inventories, I like, okay, students, what about now practicing whether you understood the concepts or not, doing a crossword quiz, okay? And they have the link to this website and they can just practice first in, first out. I mean, with a crossword puzzle, okay? I never kind of prepared a list of resources or nice or good web pages, but I can think of it and then share it, okay? And then all of this needs time. Invest time searching for the right video for this class, preparing the video for this other class, finding a reading or a news clip that can work, etc.
Okay, thank you very much, Nieves. I think we have to stop the Q&A session here. So thanks for asking these questions, and then move to the third part.
Yeah, I continue.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll minimize this. Yes. So the third part is about examples of synchronous activities, video conferences mainly, okay? So the challenges here, and in line with our comments before, are about what we mentioned regarding the technology. We have less control of the environment. Importantly, we cannot read the room as easily as you do in the classroom. I would love to see your faces now, but no, unfortunately, I can't. I mean, given the volume of participants in this class, and this is an issue, okay? And then we have less room for improvisation, but it also offers opportunities. First, it forces us to engage with technology, to understand what is there, what is available, and take advantage of it. And second, I think it also is a great opportunity to take us out of our comfort zone, okay? Usually we have other, some of us, we may have other priorities in terms of research for tenure track and so on. Look, this is a great opportunity to think and reflect upon our courses and updating the material. So let's do it, okay? Video conferences work very well with modified or enhanced lectures with questions and answers. We may add exercises as well. They work well with the students' presentations, and then for exams, based on my experience, they can also work. But then in case-based sessions or review sessions, we can always use them. Before any delivery of a video conference, you try to do your best in creating the feeling that this is a classroom, that we are in a learning environment and we are sharing this experience. So get physically and mentally ready for a class. So dress up, prepare your stuff, and take the bottle of water with you. So feel yourself in a classroom and make them feel in a classroom. Having the seating chart with you, or if you have a student's roster with you, it really helps. Why? Because it keeps yourself engaged with the students. It's not you talking to a screen. Is you talking to your students, okay? Then having informal chats with students also help, chit chat about the weather, or like we had. I love the interaction we had just today at the beginning of this presentation. And then when possible, just call your students by name. This may be feasible when you have large groups of participants. What about the delivery? As some of the questions in the chat pointed out, here the problem is how to keep them engaged. You really need to make an effort in creating an introduction that engage students, okay? You may include real life examples, explain why the topic is important, motivate the subject, but this is key. And then I mentioned before answering the question by Arthur, you need to break the content into parts. A 60-minute lecture will not work. Students will not be with you, and you may lose track as well. So use short interactive activities in between. For example, polls that you can create in Zoom or in Adobe Connect, and the results will be broadcast immediately. So you can talk to students about why some of you think X, some of you think Y, etc. You can use cold calls in small groups or open small debates. Insert short videos related to the topic under discussion. This kind of breaks the lecture kind of activity, or solve exercises together with the students in an Excel spreadsheet, a chat. Ask your students to do presentations. Let's see some examples that may help you to understand a little bit better what I mean. In this class, for example, I'm explaining the closing journal entries, and now I'm asking the students to help me.
Before we are ready to start the next accounting period. Okay, the process of closing the accounts. The best way of understanding how it works is just by doing one example. So let's do exercises E313 and E314 that requires us to record some transactions. So we will prepare the T accounts, we will prepare the income statement as well, and then we will record the journal entries, including the closing journal entries. Okay, let's see. By the way, did you try this exercise?
Yeah, so
I'm sure.
Now I kind of mute the video and speed is much higher, but you can see here all the activity in the chat. Okay, the students are answering my questions like, did you do the exercise? So if we have this transaction, which account is debited? Which account is credited? I may not be able to follow all the answers, but I have an overall view of how the session is going. In a classroom, not all the students will answer. Here, I can get that feeling by looking at the chat, okay? And then the animated slides also help, okay? Because create this kind of this idea of interaction and keep building up the exercise. Another example, in this one, what I'm asking the students is to prepare the exercises in advance. They will send me the PowerPoint or the PDF file. I'll give them feedback, ask them for changes if needed, and they will explain the exercises to their colleagues in the session. What do you want to do? I use the slide, I take care of the slides, or you want to control the slides? I do it?
Yes, please. Yes.
Okay. Very good. Here, the floor is yours.
So the first exercise will be
now
with
the
me.
group starts with the exercise, okay? Or what I can do is just to change from PowerPoint to an Excel spreadsheet and take the students with me through the process of preparing an exercise, like in this case.
So first section of the statement of cash flows. Cash flows from operating activities. So as I've just said, the starting point will be net income, okay? So how much is the net income of the period? As per the income statement, the net income is £32,000.
Whiteboard will also be very helpful because you can pinpoint what you want to bring into the cells and so on. What if you have a case-based method or a case-based session? Well, in that case, you can also do it through a video conference, and then the professor will introduce and motivate the case in the first place, like Marco here.
So, ready to start. So the case that I asked you to read is this case about the winery, okay, the Accounting and MacLeod winery. I hope that you have read it. Okay, so the setup of the case is it's pretty simple. Okay, we have this guy, Mr. Mike MacLeod, that is passionate about wine and decides to start a winery. Okay, and so we have some information about the setting up of this winery and the beginning of the operation of this winery. Okay, before we start discussing the case, so let me just set up some methodological notes about.
Give some information about how the case discussion will be done, and then the interaction starts, okay, with Marco asking questions and then the students participating.
This example, we have the same issue because we have to remember what happens from year 6 onwards. Can I stop watering and fertilizing the plants?
No, actually, the expenses are rising from 1,000 to 1,500.
So I have to keep watering the plants. And so if for those that have defended that this is an investment, is it an investment until year 5 or is it an investment for the whole of the life of the thing as an investment?
Well, because I answered that I would do it as a cost of assets, so I'll do it just for the 5 years, because that's how.
Their views about the questions of the case. And oops, what happened here? No signal. Yes, this may happen. What if there are technical problems during the presentation? Well, never panic, or try your best not to panic, okay? Technical problems may always happen. It's important to keep calm. If you can, it's important to detect whether it is an individual problem, so with the student's connection or ability related, or if it's a general problem. If it's an individual problem, then try to help, but then for a short period of time. I mean, you don't want your class to be out of track because one student. You may ask him or her to contact the IT help online if it's available. If not, you can arrange a meeting with him or her afterwards, or invite him or her to follow the recorded session. If it's a general problem, then you need to apologize to students and seek technical help. Again, be calm and show confidence, okay? In the worst case scenario, what may happen is that you have to cancel the class and reschedule it. Okay, it will be done. Hopefully, it will not be an exam. Thus, the class ends with once you finish the video conference, not really. You need to make sure that you share the slides and materials with your students, okay? You may even upload a pre-class presentation without exercises and then a post-class presentation with the solution of the exercises. And always post an announcement or send an email explaining where to find the materials. Remember what I said before, communication is important. Short and clear communication. And then something that would be very helpful is to use a Q&A discussion board, okay, to stay connected with your students after the video conference. Often students come to us asking questions after the class. This is not possible now. So open this discussion or the board or forum as a way to answer general doubts that students may have. It also helps in terms of reducing the individual emails you may get from your students. Marco will talk more about asynchronous tools, okay? Before that, any questions or comments?
Yes, there are some questions. So the first is, with smaller groups, is it advisable to ask all participants to switch on their video? So does that help to engage in more questions? And how do you encourage your students to take part and to use their video?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. First, the software matters. If you're using Adobe Connect, usually, I don't know the most recent version, but usually it's not easy to, I mean, the session will be affected by having all video cameras on. Okay, so when I teach online using Adobe Connect, the interaction happens through the chat. I don't see them. I think it's great to see them. So in Zoom, for example, this is fantastic because I can see you, Christine, and this is great. Here, there's a key difference between face-to-face students and online students. Online students have no problem in switching on the cameras. They are always willing to do it. Face-to-face students may be more reluctant. It's not easy, okay? I think Marco can perhaps provide some insights here based on the last course he taught in May. Marco?
It was a very small, fairly small group. So with small group, if the technology allows us, I definitely would go for having them on camera. It recreates a little bit the feeling of a proper room, and it helps a lot interaction. Okay, but it depends on the technology. Yes.
No, but then Marco, like in the example I showed from your class, the two students were using pictures, not showing their camera. So
yeah, but that's something that I asked them to change later on in the course. Okay, that was one of the first sessions. Okay, it's not vital. You can do it even without camera if it is, but if it is possible, it's good to see them.
And convince them that's useful.
Okay, thank you. And another question that popped up is how to use the accounting blocks as teaching materials. There were already some examples in the chat from other colleagues, but do you have particular suggestions for accounting blocks that can be used?
Accounting blocks, what do you exactly mean?
Well, there were already examples like, now I can't find it.
One of the limitations of Zoom, for example, is when I'm presenting, I don't see the chat. And this, I find it hard because I would love to see what the audience is writing. I mean, and yeah, so unfortunately, I couldn't see the chat.
Well, someone was talking about accountingcoach.com or something like that. So the blogs that you have in the internet, can you include them in your sessions?
I will avoid using pre-cooked material that is not ours. I mean, meaning, of course, the textbook I will use, okay, and other material. But it's important that if I'm recording, I mean, creating a video, or if I'm creating, and I'm providing a class, it has to be my class, and that feeling should be there. So I don't want my class to be converted into kind of a standard accounting course that I can find online. That's not my class. I think Marco will talk a little bit more about it in the next, when discussing asynchronous activities. So it's great to use resources available, but you need to make sure that it is your class and still give the sessions your touch, okay? Make them feel that this is Nieves or Marco or Christine teaching the class.
I propose to actually take 2 more questions. So Paul, if you can ask one, and then Arthur also one.
You have to unmute yourself, Paul.
Yes, this helps. All right. One of the questions is the example you gave, you seem to have dropped marking participation, but if one wants to mark participation, do you have any suggestions on how to go about it?
For asynchronous sessions, participation is great. And Marco, if I correct,
for synchronous session, it depends on the technology that you have. For example, if you using Zoom, for example, you can have a record of the chat later on, or a record of the full session. Okay, but the problem is that if you have people that are not online directly, then it becomes difficult. I had one student that was in Canada, and you always watched the lecture afterwards, so you could not participate on in a synchronous mode, and so I couldn't penalize him for doing that. Okay, so you are less free to use participation. You may not be able to use participation as much when you are doing synchronous online VC teaching.
And then
and so you have to change a little bit your way of evaluating that.
And if it's feasible to consider participation both in video conferences and in asynchronous activities. In asynchronous activities, I think it works very well. If you have if there is a guarantee that all the students may be able to participate on time, follow the live sessions, what I usually do with my online teaching is, if there are 10 video conferences, the evaluation will be graded on the best 9. Why? Because there may be always, a technical issue or something that affects the participation, not because of it's not their intention, but there may be a technical issue. So what I do is to consider the best of 4 out of 5 discussion boards, the best of 9 out of 10 video conferences, okay? To also discount the factor that technology may fail.
Next question was, how do you motivate students to discuss or start a discussion? Do you directly address people, or what is your suggestion on that?
Well, this depends on the teaching style that we have. I don't use cold calls in the classroom, and I don't use them in a video conference, okay? It really depends on your teaching approach, but I always try to convince them that participation matters, and it's like, well, try to relate it to your experiences. I'm talking now about graduate students, for example, and yeah, keep them engaged. That's the challenge, as I said before, and if participation counts, then that can act as a kind of incentive to be engaged. And so when possible, add participation component, because that's a way of doing it. Okay, but it's the toughest part.
If I can add something, as soon as you get to know them a little bit, if you can, okay, if it is not incredibly big, the audience, okay, use what you know about them. You know that there is one that is passionate about wine, okay? So try to link that with that. So use your knowledge of them, okay? But this is true for online and for presential teaching, okay? So this is always the difficult part, okay? To keep them awake. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. If I can ask people to mute themselves, because I hear some background noises sometimes. Thank you very much. So let's actually move now, Marco, to the last part.
Doing at the moment. So here we go. So after having seen some example of synchronous activity, let's move to asynchronous activity. Okay, so what are the challenges when you do asynchronous activity? The extreme lack of proximity, okay, because you and the students work at different time. You post something, they read it, and then they post something, and so on. So you get very close to MOOC type of education, massive online open courses, which is good for something, but it's not really what they're looking for. It's all about recorded communication. You write a message, they read it sometime later on. They write a message, you read it sometime later on, and so on. And the same with video. So you don't do things at the same time. Okay, but there are also opportunities in asynchronous activities because it can facilitate a deeper contribution. The need to record your contribution prompts more reflection. You can go over it and change it before you actually post it, whatever it is, a message, a video, and so on. So you have the chance to think a little bit more about what you're contributing, okay? And then many asynchronous activity lasts for a longer period of time. So a discussion board, a chat may last for a day, for a couple of days, and so on. This is much longer than an 80 minutes section. So eventually, you can actually get to know your students even better than with presential teaching. This is something that was said to me when I started teaching online, and it was said, you will get to know your online student better than your presential student. I said, that's not possible. 10, 15 years later, I say this is actually true, okay, especially with asynchronous activities. And then asynchronous activities are actually very good to evaluate participation because it's all recorded, it's all there, okay? So you can go back and see what they posted in that particular discussion board and so on. And so that's, in this case, is actually good. So what can we use as tools for asynchronous activities? One example is what I would call the knowledge peel video, okay, which is very good to explain a concept or to solve an exercise or to prompt some self-teaching activity. But the danger here is that there is a lot of already available similar material on the web. And Nieves has already talked about this, okay? So you have to try to make it your video, okay? It doesn't have to be perfect and win the Oscar for short movie, okay? But it has to be yours, okay? For some reason. And so let's look at a couple of examples. This is the first one on managerial cost accounting by our colleague Amanda Wilford.
In this screencast, I'm going to just go over and review how to calculate joint costs, to allocate joint costs using two different allocation methods. The first that we'll talk about is the physical measures method, and the second that we'll talk about is the sales value at split off method. So for this,
so as we see in this video, this is very precise, very professional, okay? It's easy to reuse because it's not personalized, okay? This can be used in the next edition of the course and so on, okay? The only thing that is personal here is the voice, is Amanda's voices. And so, but apart from that, this is easy to reuse, okay? And you do not see the professor. Okay, so this is a video which is good if you want to use it many times for different courses. Let's see another example.
Hello, thanks Olga for your questions. Usually what I will do is to answer in the discussion board, or at least this is what I usually do in the online classes. We use the discussion board intensively, but given that you mentioned the possibility of using a video, let's try it, okay? So share dividends. They are not very different to cash dividends, okay? So the idea is exactly the same. Distribute accumulated profits of the...
So this is a different video. It's a little bit more improvised, okay? But it's much more personal. It's completely personalized. And so for this reason, it's difficult to use. If you remember, at the beginning, it says, thank you, Olga. So this is a video for Olga, okay? It's completely personalized. But exactly for that reason, it's a little bit more difficult to reuse this video later on. You have to edit it, cut, and add other pieces and so on. Okay, and the professor is there more than in the previous video. Nieves decided to use the camera and to have the short video up in the top right corner of the video where you can actually see Nieves while she was talking. Okay, so this is good because it's personalized. The problem with this kind of video is that they are not so easy to reuse, okay? And then the other tool that is used extensively in asynchronous activity is the discussion board, or call it forum, or call it chat, okay? So you open a discussion on something that lasts for a certain period of time, and this is done through things that are posted and read later on and so on. Generally messages, could be video and so on. It's very good to discuss controversial concepts. Cases, it usually lasts for some time, and my tip here, try to bring some real life into the discussion. It could be things that happens during the week of the discussion, okay? And so bring them into the classroom, okay? And this is also good, I think, this tool to help students bring their own experience into the classroom. How would I manage a discussion board like this, okay? I will usually start with a short video, an introductory video, okay? Let's see a short example. So we will, as usual, we will use a couple of real-life examples, okay? We will start with a bottle of the fast food, okay? And so we will compare the financial of Papa John's maker of pizza, with the financial of McDonald's, maker of burger. And so this is a short video, okay, that I would use as an introduction, a short visual introduction to the topic. They see you, okay, you are there, and I would connect what we are going to discuss during the discussion board with some easy to remember everyday life experience. In this case is the choice between pizza, burger for some fast food when you go out with friends, but this is connected to financial statement analysis, which was the topic of the discussion for that particular week. But at this point, nothing is too specific, okay? And I don't get into the financial statement of these two companies very much at this point, okay? The point is I want to recreate proximity, okay? Exactly what is not there in asynchronous activity. And so that, I think, is helpful, okay? Then the action starts, and so we get to the discussion board. I will start with a very general question. In this case, I'm just asking which one of the two companies is actually doing better, okay? And so I would let them act and post their answer to this question, and I would leave some time for them to read each other post and discuss among themselves before I jump in again. If I jump in early, it's just to give some clarification and so on, but I would wait a little bit before I post another deep post from myself, okay? Because they have to have time to discuss among themselves before you can jump in. This is something that it's a danger to be too active in a discussion board, because you kill the discussion among them. They like to discuss among each other. And then at some point I would enter with another deeper post, and I would start getting a little bit more specific about what I'm asking. For example, now I would actually ask, for example, where are these preference shares reported in the Papa John's 2019 balance sheet? This is a much more precise question that forces them to go more deeply into the document, okay? And as I said, the discussion board is also very good to bring out the experience of the student. This is an example of a very good post of one of my students that brought in his own experience, okay, and he knew a lot about the case, and so he talked about the funder, what happened with the NFL, and so on. So, and this was a deep post from one of the students that helped a lot of the discussion, okay. And then what I would do at the end, I would actually hopefully post another video, and this is a summary video, and here you have an example. But this was not the only interesting thing about this annual report. It was also interesting to look of where we found these preference shares in the balance sheet of Papa John's, and these preference shares, even if they are shares, they're actually in between stockholder equities and liabilities, okay? We find them here. And again, it is in between stockholder equity and liability. So what is my last plan for the weekend? It's obvious, and I said it during the discussion. It's going to be pizza. So I will take my flour, add some yeast to it, a little salt, a little bit of olive oil, and I will have the perfect dough to make pizza at home. But if anything goes wrong, I have plan B, okay? So this is a longer video. This is just edited. It's much longer than what you see, okay? And it's still connected to the same everyday life experience that I used at the beginning, okay? But it enters much more deeply into the document, into the annual statement in this case. And so I actually highlight few parts of the annual statement, but at the end I close again with the everyday life experience where we started from, and I give my answer. In this case, or pizza or burger, I would go for pizza, okay? And again, the trick here is that I want to recreate proximity as much as I can, okay, and keep them close to me as much as I can by using this everyday life experience, okay? And this is it. So I'm happy or open for questions at this point.
Thank you, Marco. I think we have room for 3 short questions and a short answer. And then I will make some announcements.
All right. Do you recommend to stick to the same tools and methods during the whole semester? Or do you recommend to have some variety and switch from synchronous to asynchronous and using different platforms from one to the next?
Okay, it depends pretty much why you are teaching online. If you are teaching online because you were forced and the student that you have in front of you are students that would like to be presential students, then you have to use as much synchronous activity as possible. This is what they were looking for, and this is as close as you can get to a presential class, okay? If on the other side you have in front of you people that have deliberately chosen to be online students, then a combination of the tools works very well, and a combination of synchronous with asynchronous activity works very well, and to change from one to the other works very well. But we have experienced this in our forced transition to online teaching, that students that are forced to go online don't like that much asynchronous activity, because this is not what they were looking for. They were looking for classes, 80 minutes bang shot classes, okay? And so you don't have to exaggerate by substitute presential classes with asynchronous activity if it is possible.
Thank you.
One question which came up: how do you handle the discussion board? Are you there all the time and try to answer questions, or do you wait until the other students answer questions? What are your recommendations for that?
Yes, my recommendation is that you have to be all the time there, but silently, okay? You don't have to be active all the time. You have to be all the time there because you have to read what they are posting, and you have to be ready to intervene if there is the need of some precise clarification or something like that. But you don't have to be too active. You have to let them work and let them discuss among themselves before you actually jumping again and take the case forward, okay? And so you have to be there. It is demanding. You have to be there a lot, okay, but not necessarily actively. You have to monitor the discussion board very often, but you have to limit your intervention. You have to let them roll and let them discuss among each other, okay? Because otherwise people will feel cut out, because if you immediately comment on a good answer, then they don't know what to say anymore, okay? And so they feel, those that have not had the time to post because they are in different time zones and so on, they just don't know what to say anymore, and so you have cut them out. So not always there, but not always there actively.
And last question: how do you keep track of the right pace to make sure that you have the right pace, especially when it comes to asynchronous lecturing, so that you are not too fast or not too slow for your students content-wise?
Again, you have to monitor the frequency and the content of the posts for from the students, okay? And they can get lost, okay? And so if they see that the posts are being too many questions and they don't understand and so on, you're probably going too fast, okay? Or if they simply stop posting because they don't know what to say, there's a problem there. So as I said before, you have to monitor constantly what they are doing, okay? And as long as there is a lively discussion among them, things are going well. As long as they stop talking to each other and they just look for you, then there is something that is not working too well, okay?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Before I leave you the floor, Philip, I just want to show our last slide, okay? And so our advice is be ready for some adventure. And this is a picture of myself teaching online in a desert road in the north of Ghana, because I had a car accident and I didn't get on time where I had to get, and I had to teach online. So be ready for some adventure.
Fantastic, fantastic. Thank you, Marco and Nieves, for these fantastic presentations, and also these inspiring, the inspiring advice you gave us. Also, special thanks for the Q&A coordinators, Christine, Paul, and Arthur. Very helpful. Thank you very much. And last but not least, I would like to thank our hosts, Baha, for taking care of hosting this session, but also for the whole registration process. So I hope you definitely got inspired by today's session. As I indicated before, the slides will be available on the European Accounting Association ARC